Good morning, fans of politics across Canada and Newfoundland. It's The Curse of Politics featuring Scott Reid and Jenni Byrne. They're following this campaign so you don't have to. They leave nothing on the table, pouring their hearts and souls into this daily political analysis for you. It's emotional, and we'll get to it soon. But first, Allison Smith of Queen's Park Today. Allison, what's the news?
Good morning. It's debate day. The first of two official debates of the Ontario election campaign. The event is going to start at 1 p.m. Listeners can stream it on YouTube. It's pretty easy to find. And it's up in North Bay. I'm interested. I think that Stephen Del Duca is going to be the one to watch in this debate, not just because he's kind of rising to second place in the polls, but more because he's untested in this type of leadership debate. We see Andrea Horwath and Doug Ford go toe-to-toe in question period all the time. And I can't even think of a time that Stephen Del Duca and Doug Ford have been in the same room, let alone debating. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how the two of them kind of match up at the podiums.
I wonder if he'll tell Del Duca that he has a nice smile. That's what he said to Kathleen Wynne last time.
Oh, yes, I remember that. Yeah. Other than that, not much on the leaders' agendas. We don't have anything else from Ford. Horwath is going to go down to Barrie after the event, and that's Stephen Del Duca is starting the day with a press conference at 10 a.m., so he'll have a little bit more to say. But yeah, I guess we'll see what comes up. The events or the debates being moderated by Marcus Schwab from CBC Radio North. So he's gonna know what's up on the northern questions. But I guess I'm more interested to see how, for example, the Liberals' platform from yesterday stacks up, and how the other leaders go after him, after Stephen Del Duca on that.
Do you know much about the format? Normally, it's not a full-on debate. Normally, it's more of a Q&A thing with the audience, and mayors and other people from the north stand up and ask questions.
Yeah, I think it will be a little bit more casual than for sure the TVO debate that's going to be next Monday, because it's part of a conference actually that a couple Northern Ontario municipalities host. But I think it should still get to some level of spicy, hopefully.
Excellent. Well, you'll be back, or you're going to watch it, obviously.
Oh, I'm going to watch it.
Yeah. All right. Well, you'll be back tomorrow to tell us all about it.
Yes.
And thank you again for my newsletter, Queen's Park Today, right there in my inbox at 6 a.m. I don't know what I would talk about on this show if it wasn't for your newsletter. Thank you.
Written by Alan S. Hale. And I have to ask you about that, Allison, because the skipper on Gilligan's Island was Alan Hale Jr. Is this the direct descendant of the skipper who was putting together the briefing each day?
It is not. He's our Queen's Park bureau reporter. He actually throws the S in there in his, I guess, pen name. So because I guess he gets this joke a lot.
Well, I thought it stood for Alan's. I thought the S stood for skipper, so I thought he was gaming us.
No, he's heard this one before.
All right. Well, he's going to think I'm his new best friend then.
Yeah, exactly.
So listeners, you can find Queen's Park Today at politicstoday.news.
Excellent. Thanks, Allison. See you tomorrow morning. Thanks for doing this. Hey, we have new data.
Cool. Oh, excellente.
We have new data, courtesy of Greg Lyle and Innovative Research. Thank you, Greg, for this. And frankly, it's a little bit of a dose of cold water for those of us who were anxiously following the daily ebbs and flows of this campaign, and we're greatly interested in what strategies and tactics were impacting on what. Turns out not much of anything. People aren't paying that much attention. People haven't been moved very much. There's not a ton of change. Let's look at the top line. We'll dive in as the days go on into some of the other data, but let's look at the top line. Decided vote, 40% Conservative, 28% Liberal, 24% NDP. Here's where it gets interesting, I think. In Toronto, it is 43 Liberal, 26 PC, 26 NDP. So Toronto's hardened up for the Libs from Greg's last numbers over the course of the first week. The rest of the GTA, PC's 43, Liberals 31, NDP 19.
So the rest of the GTA, let's call it what it is. It's the 905.
905.
Yeah.
Yeah. South and West, 46% PC, 26% NDP, 19% Liberal. North and East, 40% PC, 25% NDP, 21% Liberal. And the last data point I'll throw at you is a week ago, 32% of Ontarians said they'd heard enough to make up their minds, and 62% said they'd like to hear more. After the first week, 45% say they've heard enough to make up their minds, and 48% say they still need to hear more.
Huh. Does that surprise you, that number? That seems like a fairly that's a statistically notable jump.
It is. It's a very big jump, and it does jump out because it indicates that people were paying attention and drawing signals, and they were largely having their opinions confirmed by what they saw.
Right.
Out there in corporate Canada, there are meaningful behaviors that make our country and world a better place. And then there are just words, the signaling of virtue without the actions necessary to make any real change. For a few weeks now, we've been telling the story of TELUS's ESG commitments, environmental, social, and governance. TELUS is a company driven by social purpose, not because it's fashionable in this third decade of the 2000s, but right from their inception. To use their world-leading technology in a way that's not only good for business, but good for people and the world. Across healthcare and agriculture, sustainability, bridging the digital divide to ensure that all Canadians have connectivity. They put the well-being of their customers, communities, and the planet first. It all sounds so nice, right? But let me tell you how TELUS governs themselves so that those nice-sounding words become actions. Theirs is a culture of what gets measured gets done. ESG targets are built right into how they evaluate their corporate performance. Environmental initiatives, measured and reported on. Carbon reduction, measured and reported on. Community giving, measured and reported on. The list goes on and on, Hurley-Burleyites. That's how seriously TELUS takes ESG reporting. And the result is it drives accountability. It turns their values into behaviors. And it's not just private reporting either. TELUS, as you know, is a public company. Transparent disclosure of financial performance is a given. What separates TELUS is that they also believe in full disclosure of their performance across all ESG metrics and how they make their decisions about where to put their efforts and their money around environmental and social sustainability. Transparency means you can read all about it here in their sustainability and ESG report at telus.com/sustainability. Jenny, what's your top of mind reaction to all that?
Well, good news for the Liberals in Toronto, but I don't think it's a surprise that, there were a lot of seats the Libs lost in the last election that are kind of bedrock seats for them electorally. The downtown core where, the Spadina's, Fort Yorks, the Toronto Centres, the University of Rosedales. I'm not surprised. Beaches, East York. I'm not surprised that they're back, but I guess getting confirmation that they're kind of back is good. I think the numbers overall are very good for Doug, especially when you see the leads that he has. They have both in the 905 and Southwest Ontario, and also in North and East Ontario. So I know that the campaign is very bullish in terms of seats in the North this election, which are generally seats that go to the NDP. And so I think it's good news for Del Duca in certain areas. Very good news for Doug overall, and very bad news for Andrea Horwath overall.
Can you expand on that last point a little bit? I mean, there's obviously to it, but what do you see in there particularly that makes it bad news for them?
Well, I just think it seems as people are galvanizing, or to your point of the 43% of people now that have solidified their opinion, they don't need They don't need more information. It seems that those people are going towards the Liberal Party. I don't think that any one of the 32% from last week that said that they needed more information in terms of how they were going to vote. They didn't need more information about Doug. They've seen him he's the premier. They've seen him more than they probably would have seen him with COVID than they would have generally seen him in a non kind of COVID period, the 2 years that there was. And so I think that for Horwath, because she has lacked a message other than I'm not Doug Ford, I'm not Stephen Del Duca. She is losing ground to the Liberals in terms of the official opposition status, so to speak, to this government.
Lee Majors, what do you think?
Thank you for that. I am the $6 million man. We have the technology. We can rebuild me. Better than I was before, stronger than I was before.
We're going to build you back better, brother.
I obviously pretty much share all of Jenni's take. I mean, I think my biggest takeaway, obviously the Liberals, it puts them in the catbird seat in Toronto. That means you haul in a fair number of seats. It means that they might win some seats in the 905. Means they're competitive to win some seats in the 905. Again, all of that, that's where, go fishing where the fish are, and that's where the seats are. So, the NDP can take comfort perhaps in their overall numbers that the gap between them and the Liberals isn't huge, and they lead in certain parts of the province. But it looks like they're piling up popular vote in places where it isn't as consequential for them in terms of seat haul.
When you say lead, you mean lead the Liberals?
Yeah, the NDP are in third, are they not?
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, no, well, you're saying in certain regions they lead, and you...
in certain regions they're leading, and so, they can take some comfort in that, and they can take some comfort in the overall number of, 28 versus 24, saying, well, we're within margin of error of the Liberals for second place, but, where the seats are rich, they are poor, and that's a big problem for the NDP. I think the biggest takeaway, though, I find what's most important is that I find it reassuring and that it demonstrates that we have been correct for a week, because I think what this tells you is not
it's a big number for Ford. It's a big fucking number for Ford.
It's a really big number. 40 is a huge number for Ford. Like, it's a really big number. And it tells you, as you said yesterday, David, no one's laid a glove on him. No one has made the guy take one step back on this campaign. No one has made the PC's answer for anything. And there's no drumbeat of change. And, you've got to do it. So I think one of the dynamics, we'll see it first on display this afternoon in the debate, notwithstanding a polite environment, does Andrea Horwath feel that she must go at the premier hard and start to build this case for change and a case for disaffection with Doug Ford's leadership? I don't know how she can afford not to. And then the interesting question is, does Del Duca do the same, or is he hoping that he can count on the NDP to make the case for change and he can just position himself as the alternative? I think the issue for the Liberals is don't get too cute. There's no harm in you making the case for change. You've got to make the case for change. And if you want to try and gather some momentum, you better start doing it now. 40 to 28, that's a bad spread, man. And, the Liberals might cheer these numbers and say, we feel like we're in pretty good shape and we're making progress, but you're going to lose. And if you want to win this election, you got to use the second week to make some moves.
But what issues are they going to they make the case for change? What issues are they using to make the case for change? Because what they've been doing up until now is not working. So where do they go after Doug in terms of making the case? And it's a genuine question.
I go back to where I was earlier. I don't think they have really made the case for change. I think they spent the first week trying to position themselves on policy, capped yesterday by the release of their platform. Seems like a very solid, substantial document. So, depending on how you feel about their policies. But it's been a policy week. It's been, we are there on education, and here's our platform in whole, and we're costed and responsible, and they're not. I think they've got to go with Doug. I think they've got to go hard at Doug and say, this is a guy you can't count on. We got a cost of living problem in this province. He's not going to focus on it. He's not going to fix it. He can't focus and fix on it. We will.
What are the prospects? What are the prospects that this campaign, for all intents and purposes, retreats to Toronto in a battle for second place? Like, if you're the NDP and you are looking at this set of numbers, do you say to yourself, well, I'm going to double down on Southwest and try to beat the Conservatives in the Southwest? Or do you say, holy Christ, we're going to lose all of our seats in Toronto, we have to retrench?
I think you have to do both. I don't think they have a choice. I don't think they can pick. They have to do both.
We know what's going to happen. Pardon me, Jenny.
Pardon me? No, but if you look at the numbers, so if these numbers, 26% in Toronto, as opposed to the Liberals' 43%, that is hard, but you can't also just leave, at this stage, you're not leaving all your incumbents. You can't leave your incumbents and basically say, you guys are fucked. You might do that with 2 weeks left to go in the campaign, but you're not doing it exactly now. So I think it's got to be a pronged approach. I think they have no choice but to campaign in the Southwest. And also that is where I would focus on in terms for them, but also, pay attention to Toronto and pay attention to the North.
I'm with you, Jenny. I think, David, what you are giving us is future news. I think you've just predicted the last 10 days of this campaign. I don't think that they're going to do it now. And, maybe arguably if they did it now, it might help them a little bit in Toronto. But the internal dynamics of their campaign, if they're seen to be visibly never leaving Toronto, if they're seen to be visibly husbanding all the resources, their best campaign people, whatever union support they have, that's all sort of pouring out of, say, Nipissing and the Southwest and into Toronto. That will be noticed. That will unleash unpleasant dynamics. They're not going to make that decision. So they're gonna tread water for a week, hoping that something turns this around, hoping that the debates turn this around. And then in the last 10 days of the campaign, they'll gradually, reluctantly, and probably ineffectively try to retreat to Toronto and fight it out there.
I mean, you're already making resource allocation decisions, though, that will impact on this. You are deciding how much time the leader spends where. You are deciding where your advertising dollars get spent.
Yes.
Yeah. Advertising will be the first thing to move because particularly in this world, it's the least visible. You can do it without a protest of your candidates and campaign managers. So that'll be the first signal.
Well, right. We'll see. My guess is Horwath will stay up north after this debate. It would be weird if she didn't kind of do a tour of the northern ridings.
But in the bottom line for both of these parties is if Ford's number is at 40, it doesn't matter what the fuck they're doing to each other. Right? I mean, Ford's number has to come down. So Ford's got to be 34, 35% in order to be beaten.
For sure.
But that's very logical. They're fighting for their own lot. We can look at it from 30,000 feet, but at the end of the day, they're fighting for their own lives. They're fighting for their own candidates and caucus members that are out there. So it's hard to make the decision in terms of, we'll focus on ththese ridings because the Liberals will win these, and we've got to bring Doug down. It's very hard. You know this, David. It's very hard to have those conversations with candidates. It's especially when you've got a significant amount of your caucus in ridings that are not traditionally Liberal ridings, and you're going to do whatever you can to try to hang on to those for as long as you possibly can.
For sure, but there's an underlying philosophy, right, which it sort of overveils all, overhues all of this, which is how do you get to where you absolutely have to be at minimum, right? So do you fight for second or do you fall to second? I'm a big believer that you fall to second, that the best way to get to second for sure is to be competitive for first. And you got to be gunning to win, and you got to be doing everything you possibly can to win the campaign. And that means they've got to go after Doug. And I think the weakest, maybe not the weakest, the most critical aspect, you talk about his numbers being at 40 among decided voters, the PC number. I think you've got to dent and create doubts in people's confidence in Ford himself. I think you've got to rattle Ford in the debate. You finally get him where he's not completely contained. And I think you got to do that. And that's the best way to try to get competitive for first. And that's therefore the best way to get to second. But if you're visibly fighting for second place after 6 days in this campaign, then I think you got a problem.
So, dear listeners, I want to talk about green. It's a thing nowadays, in case you've tuned out. And about the greenest thing you can do is plant a tree. Restore the planet's lungs. Concerned people do it every day, and our sponsor, CN, is alongside them, helping. CN runs a program called Eco Connections, along with its partners Tree Canada and America in Bloom. The objective is mass reforestation of communities and First Nations along its network in Canada and the U.S. Since 2012, CN and its partners have planted more than 2.3 million trees, which makes CN one of the leading private non-forestry tree planters. The railway runs through national parks, wetlands, forests, and prairies, and CN is serious about preserving them. It's more than that, of course. CN's greening policies are vast. Rail is the greenest form of cargo transport extant. That's it. That's all. Think about it. One train can take hundreds of tractor-trailers off our highways. Trains don't stop at traffic lights and have minimal rolling resistance. Compared to big rig trucks or jet aircraft, a train is practically a Prius. Yes, locomotives use fossil fuel, but CN works relentlessly on reducing its carbon footprint, which has already shrunk pretty dramatically over the past several years. CN consumes about 15% less fuel per gross ton mile than the industry average. Among the big Class 1 North American railroads, CN is the most fuel and carbon efficient of all. That's a really big deal. There are corollaries to this equation too. Some of the most environmentally friendly products made move from factory to customer by train. CN trains have for years moved wind turbines from factories in maritime Canada to wind farms in Texas, the latest electric vehicles and solar panels and high-capacity batteries. They all arrive by train. CN has used technology to reduce emissions at its yards and other facilities. Ultimately, CN hopes to someday stop using even diesel. It has purchased a fleet of electric trucks to carry out last-mile deliveries and has commissioned a prototype electric locomotive. Yes, that's right. Really, really big battery. CN, you see, is the railway of the future, and green is where we all want to go. So I want to leapfrog from this right into the Liberal platform yesterday and maybe a discussion of platforms generally. Because, I mean, the Liberal platform, I think it got sort of roundly praised for being comprehensive and having a number of good ideas in it. They claimed it was costed, which I guess the NDP's platform is not yet costed. But nonetheless, it was an extraordinarily long list of things that they would do. And, in terms of, I'm not sure it serves them well to have such a, I guess I'm interested in this discussion between comprehensive platforms and the sort of the 5-point platform. And the comprehensive platform, it doesn't gel to me into, again, an attack on Ford. It doesn't gel to me in here's what's wrong with this province, and here's what I'm going to fix about it. Because you get to, here's 38 things that are wrong with this province, and I'm going to fix them, and people start to tune that shit out. What is the core, essential thing that's wrong and has to change? That doesn't come through to me.
Agreed. 100%. David, I agree with you 100%. It's just kind of a laundry list of policies. There's almost no contrast to Doug. It's the deficit numbers are the same, if not just a little bit worse in terms of paying off, or a little bit better, whatever it is. There's bizarre policies like, pharmacists can prescribe drugs for things like menstrual cramps and pink eye, things that you actually can just buy over the counter as it is right now. Which I found I found those policies extremely weird. It's a waste of ink. I really hope he doesn't.
You've always been soft on pink eye, so I am not. Forget it. You're leave pink eye alone. That's fine. Cows are people too.
So I agree with you. I think that I think it's a big comprehensive policy document with no contrast to the PC party. It's to go back to Scott's point, which he's made, and I agree with him. There is nothing really that contrasts with the Doug Ford government in terms of cost of living, which is it is the number one issue across the country. In terms of what people are worried about.
I wonder if, so first of all, I agree with you guys emphatically. And, I feel like you look at that document and you go, well, they obviously felt like the day was about showing that they could write a better speech from the throne. And I don't think that people are looking for a speech from the throne in this campaign. I almost think that, if to take one step back from this specific campaign, but your question about platforms, David, I kind of almost question whether there's any space left in any campaign any longer for that comprehensive red book, even CSR as well. As much as CSR was about branding and labeling, it was still a comprehensive document. I wonder if there's any room left for that kind of document. In the way that people consume information, the way that people receive their media, I don't know that you can afford to put forward a governing document as compared to something that is like Stephen Harper, 2006. Here's my 6 priorities. They actually hang together as a worldview, and they tell you what kind of change I would deliver. And my fundamental concern is the one you'll be unsurprised to hear, since I keep barking at it, is the point you make, David, which is this document doesn't tell me what's wrong with Doug Ford and why I need to vote for somebody other than the PCs. And I don't really care what your policy is on, rents at that point, if it's not a sharp critique of Ford, because that's where you got to get to.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel. I just don't see it as a political document, and I don't think that any of these stakeholder groups that will be attracted to these individual measures matter to the election at all. In that vein, I was kind of interested to see that the Conservatives felt a need to adjust their platform on the Ontario disability benefit because they didn't have it in their platform. I don't even know why they would feel the need to do that. I don't mean to be dismissive of the issue, but it just seemed like they looked at something and said, oh my God, there's an area we haven't covered off, so we forgot about that. We need to cover it off. Everybody feels a need to have a policy on everything. Well, I think people are looking for the most basic things to change.
Well, but how could you not have a policy? Like, what would people in the Yes Express say? There has to be a policy.
Wait a minute. They've suggested we won't say yes to people with disabilities and their families. Well, by God, we'll say yes. Is there any hint in that policy move? And we're probably overthinking it, but is there any hint in that policy response from the PCs? Is there any tell about what they fear in terms of a potential critique of Ford? Like, does it suggest to you that, well, we got to be careful. This policy writ large is obviously not that consequential, but being dismissive on this policy might suggest to people that the premier is a bit of a prick, that he doesn't, that he kind of doesn't care about some people and toss them to the side. And we can't let that happen. There's enough latent, could be inflamed, that sense of David Herle, bit of a dick kind of thing, that we can't let that get a toehold. So we're always going to be telling people, joking aside, we're always going to be telling people that we're saying yes to them too, and that we're not trying to leave anybody behind. I wonder if it's a little tell as to where the weak chink in Ford's armor is.
But I don't think that's what it is at all. I think that's just Doug's personality. That's just the way we've seen the government run itself over the last 4 months, or 4 years, whether it was during the pandemic or not. I think that it's not surprising that there was an issue that was raised by the Liberals. The Conservatives look around the table. Doug says, I want something fixed on this. And you go ahead. I don't think
nobody's keeping track of the money anyway, right, Jenny? So it doesn't matter.
No one is keeping track of the money in this election at all.
Which also, by the way, speaks to, I don't know, maybe people are anxious with inflation, cost of living, reports that we could be moving into recession. But you also wonder about spilling as much effort as the Liberals did on, like, it's costed and balance. Do people, I don't even know if that's a measuring tape people take out of their pocket these days, right?
I'm 100% sure people don't believe that.
Right.
I think it was an issue 20 years ago. I'm not sure it's an issue now. I think that governments are spending so much money, and they were even pre-pandemic. Governments are spending so much money. I don't think it is a metric. It was a giant deal. I know when we were in opposition and we were running campaigns against each other, it was the costing of the platform threw us off for two elections, both in 2004 and 2006. And so I think it was 20 years ago. I do not think anyone is paying any attention to it now.
I think it's what you were saying earlier, Scott. I think that they just looked at it and they said, well, this is an odd vulnerability to leave hanging out there. The other parties both have policies to raise this. Do we really want to put Doug in a position where he's on the defensive in a debate about this? Let's just take it off the table. A key advisor to Mike Harris once told me, when Mike Harris intervened to provide hepatitis C survivors with benefits that the federal government was not providing. The guy told me, people will vote for a tough guy, but they won't vote for an asshole.
Right.
And so I think that's probably what they are thinking about in terms of this issue.
But doesn't that tell you, I agree, that's my guess too, and doesn't that tell you that there is a little back in the back of their minds fear that Ford could be correctly could be successfully portrayed as an asshole, as somebody who doesn't care about some people.
I didn't know the kids were going to leave the house.
Yeah. I know it's the steepest part of the mountain because the approval numbers are high, but it just seems to me you're not going to get from second to first or from third to first unless you bring Ford personally, unless you bring his numbers down. They got to hammer him.
Yeah, they do. Ontario is facing an historic housing affordability crisis, probably the worst in our province's history. Right now, if you get in your car and drive down a 400 series highway, you'll find 10 local markets where the average price of a home exceeds $1 million. Even in small towns like Kawartha Lakes and Fenelon Falls, the birthplace of the Curse's own Jenni Byrne, an average priced home is over $800,000. So when 46% of Ontario home buyers say that they are looking to move outside the province to find a new home, you can see why. Our original sponsor, the Ontario Real Estate Association, says years of bad policy, a lack of supply, increased demand, and rising costs are to blame. If we don't do something about it now, home ownership may be out of reach for an entire generation of Canadians. That's why this June election, realtors are calling on all parties to reduce costs for first-time buyers, get more supply into the market, and end exclusionary zoning rules that keep middle-class families out of growing neighborhoods. You'll be hearing a lot more from Maria over the next several weeks about Ontario's housing affordability crisis and what can be done to fix it. Because Maria wants to see more young people become homeowners, and that starts with building a home for everyone. Read Oria's plan at ahomeforeveryone.info. Anything possible come out of this debate today? Northern debate? What could a party do today to make a difference?
Well, Doug's just going to want to come out of this debate with no coverage at all. Like no coverage, sleepy debate is what he's looking for. Like as you know, we were talking about before. This is a weird format, right? For debates, it's not the traditional kind of back and forth.
It's good for him, right? It's friendly and folksy.
Yeah.
It's 100%. It's 100% good for him. So where like the other guys are going to want to land blows on a whole, like they can try to land blows on whatever issue. Doug's going to talk about Ring of Fire. He's going to talk about the Northlander train that's going to run from Toronto and Timmins with dozens of people on it weekly. That is back. So I don't think we're going to see. Listen, I could be wrong. I don't think we're going to see much. I don't think there's going to be much out of this debate. I don't think it's going to be. I don't think tomorrow morning we're going to be like, oh my God, I can't believe that happened. Let's put it that way.
Here's the risk of this debate, which tells you the opportunity that could be lost. The risk of this debate, David, do you remember that day we spent? I can't remember what city it was, but we went and spent 3/4 of a day in a boardroom with Kathleen when she was running for re-election in 2018 on the eve of the Northern debate. And most of that day was spent going over what the Northern policies were, what the demands of individual mayors were. So this guy's going to be in the audience, and what does he want? And I think that all parties fall into that trap for the quote-unquote Northern debate. They think it's a bidding war and a competition for who is most in touch with the demands of Northern municipal leaders. And I think if you're going to do any damage whatsoever as an opposition leader, whether Torvath or Del Duca, you're going to forego that. And you're going to take the risk of not speaking entirely and constantly about, I know that the mayor of Sault Ste. Marie wants this, and I see my friend from Nipissing here and blah, blah, blah. And instead, unveil a cost of living personal attack and try to get Ford off stride. I would interrupt him. I would break format. I would do things to break Ford out of the bubble that he's in and see if you can get him flustered. See if you can get him to make a mistake. That's the number one thing you need. You need a headline and lead that's about Ford fumbling an issue where he looks like he's out of touch. He said the wrong thing. He sounded insensitive. He's bumbled. That's what you have to do. And in order to procure that moment, you got to knock him off stride and off balance. And in order to do that, you got to attack them and you got to ignore the polite format.
So, Jenni, just a reality check from you, because Scott and I are skittish. people. And perhaps we overreact to things. If you were running the NDP campaign, say right now,
yep,
would you be in a mode of what we're doing isn't working and we need to change? Or would you be in a mode of it's way too early to tell and let's at least run this plan out to the debate and see what happens?
I would actually probably at this point, I don't think you change things really on the ground, but I think in terms of communications in this debate, if I were the NDP campaign, and I was Horwath, I would walk in and I would go after both Ford and I would go after both Ford and Del Duca. She's got no choice. Like I would go balls to the wall on both of them.
Right. Okay, cool. It's time for another half hour blown right by. Fuck, I'm loving doing this with you guys in the morning. Thanks very much. So, blessing or curse? Scott, go ahead.
My curse is to Doug Ford. And my curse is, yesterday you didn't issue an itinerary. We've heard Allison raise this almost every day. Itineraries come out late. They're vague or they're non-existent whatsoever from the Ford campaign. Yesterday they went and did a meet and greet event. They tried to pretend it was an off day. I just think it's all horseshit. And I know why they're doing it. I understand it rationally that they're trying to restrict the premier's interactions with media. They're trying to diminish the likelihood that he'll say something stupid and terrible that will take a campaign that feels like it's on track, off track, but it's wrong. You're the premier of the province. There is a democratic obligation to expose yourself to media, to tell media where you're going to be and to take their questions. And I just think that they should get roughed up every minute and the media need to be tougher and the gallery need to be harder on them and they need to rub their nose in shit until they actually expose their leader in some way to some kind of questioning.
Well, if the media want to make themselves the issue of this election, then I think Doug's numbers will end up going up more than the 40% of decided voters he has already. So, my curse is actually it's a curse to the opposition to both Horwath and to Del Duca. Although it's not like I want them to change. The curse is, come on, guys. There's so much out there in terms of issues that you could be going on this government. Gas prices are about to go up across the country, and in Ontario 5 to 10 cents in the next week. And so, I on a personal level, as a conservative, I would like you to continue to do what you're doing. But from as a pundit and from someone that likes to watch and study elections, you guys need to do fucking better because you guys are absolutely out of touch and out of step with where Ontarians are at, where their heads are at, and what their priorities are.
Excellent curse. That was definitely a curse. If you were just divided as to whether or not undecided as to whether that was a blessing or a curse, it's most definitely.
and lay off pink eye, liberals. It's a natural ailment.
I'm just going to echo that because I can't think of anything else to say today based on Greg's most recent numbers, other than the bidding war for opposition isn't going to get either party anywhere close to stopping Doug Ford. And so if the objective of this campaign is to make sure Doug Ford isn't the premier at the end of it, then you gotta start focusing 100% on why he needs to be defeated. What is the case for change? It isn't strong enough. It isn't felt by enough people. And so therefore, he's going to get his 40% and the rest of it doesn't matter. You got to drive him down, and I don't think you can wait for the debate. All right, folks, thank you very much. I would like to thank our presenting sponsor, TELUS, our sponsor, CN Rail, and our original sponsor, the Ontario Real Estate Association. Jenni and Scott, thanks for being here as always. It's great to see you. And everybody who listened, thank you very much. We'll see you tomorrow.
Bye, guys.
Bye. Hey, by the way, thank you to Greg, Lyle, and Innovative. How did I forget that? Jesus. Thanks for that data. Fun.